progress tutorial from where we left off here. For the purpose of the API, we will want to create one additional table to it, which is user API authentication, which means that we should not allow anyone to access our API. So we put password or token on it, so that whoever that is calling, we know whoever is calling or which application is calling our APIs at a particular point in time. So for the purpose of this, we will just create that on our database that we've already created, which is the school DB. We will just create a query on it, and then we will just put our code inside, which is actually just username and password, and then the name of the application or the organization that is calling the API. We will create a token for them, and when the token expires, and the version of application that we deal with. So we just need to create that table. And then we will insert sample data, which means that the username is test, password is test@12, and then the API name, whatever that is calling it, is API test, and then token that we have given it is 111. So we execute that one as well. So now we are ready to start our API creation. So what we do now is that we will go to Visual Studio Code. We'll create we open a new version of a Visual Studio Code, and then we will first go to our XAMPP folder and go to htdocs. So we go to applications. Mine is application, but if you're on Windows, you see that C, XAMPP, drive C, XAMPP, and then you see htdocs. Depending, maybe if you switch your application to a different location, you might have it different. By default it's at C. So I go to XAMPP, go to htdocs, I open htdocs, and I create my school underscore API. Then I hit enter. I go to my newly opened Visual Studio Code, and then I will go and open a new folder. So what I'll do is I will go into applications. I will see XAMPP, and then I will go to htdocs. I'll go to htdocs, XAMPP, application, XAMPP, htdocs, and then I will open my school API, and I'll click open. So we're going to create 3 folders under that. We have one is the API. 2, we do make sure that all the folder are on the same level. We don't create any of these 3 under any of them. So we create another one which is called config, and then we do another one which is called the API config, and we have models. Okay, so now we have the 3 in place. First of all, we're going to create the database connection file or class, which should be under config. So I will right click on config and go to new file. I'll type database.php. I'll hit enter. So now what you do is that we need to create a class from it. What we do, PHP, then we will do class, and then we call it database, and then we will have archive braces, and there's a database class that we define. For the purpose of this tutorial, as I've already created sample of this class, we just put it back and then we explain, and then we move on with it. So I'll just pick it up. For we have database class, so we pick it, we come back to it. So this script will also be made available to you on your site so that you can test with it. So you have database, a class that has been defined, and in it you have defined all the variables that we will need. We will need a local host. We will need the host, that's where the database, the server, the database server that we are, Postgres database server. And then we have the port. Port by default is on 5432, but if you have changed it in the installation, then it might be different. But my own is 5433 because I did an installation earlier on. So, and then the database that we are dealing with is school database, and then the username we are dealing with Postgres. I'm using currently temporarily using a password called WIN. Then we have con, which is the connection that will be returned to the various part of the application, and then we have DSN, which is data source name. So all of them has been declared private because we want only this class have access to them. We have declared another function which is public, which means that other classes can have access to that particular function and then make connection to the database. So what happens in this function is that we just declare connection as null, and then we will form the DNS connection, DNS, the data source name, and then what it means is that we will do a prefix, which is the Postgres SQL, and then the host name. If it is MySQL, can do MySQL, and then you continue with the rest of the parameters. So the parameters that we need here is the host, the port, the database name, the user, and then the password. So here we provide all those parameters to it, and then when we finish, we will create the connection using PDO. PDO, by the way, is PHP data object. So we create it, which is actually a class for you to be able to access databases. So this is for Postgres. You can also do for MySQL and other things, other data sources. So we just pass this variable, the data source name, to it, and then connection will be created. In case there is any error, what we are saying is that it should actually bring us the error, which is going to be echoed here for the user to be able to, for the programmer to be able to see what error is coming and resolve it accordingly. So now our database class is done properly. So the next thing that we do is going to do a database model, which means that for each of the tables that we're going to have in the database, we have one model at a time. So if you can't remember, we created a student info database table already, and then we have also created authentication table. So we are going to have two tables. So we're going to have basically two models at this moment. So we're going to have one new file, say auth.php, and then we're going to have student info.php. Okay, so that is it. So the content of this has already been created. Let's look at it, and then we will explain, and then you move on with it. So this is the authentication, which I'll pick to the work that we're doing. Authentication. So in the authentication, we are saying that we want to deal with the auth table, which is the authentication table, and then that's the only thing that we need at the moment. So what it means is that we also want a private connection to be used in here, and then we have, this is the table that we are dealing with. We declare the username and password, which are the attributes that is on the database that we've brought here. So we declare them as variable. Public means that other classes can have access to them. And then when we finish, we do this construct because we are going to receive the connection that has been established from the other class into this, so that we can execute our query on the database. So what we are saying is that we are going to select the name, the date, token expiring, and then the app version from the user API authentication table, and then we will echo those ones out and check whether there's a valid token that has been sent to us. So basically this is what happens with it. So yes, here we declare the variables, we receive the database connection that is being passed to it, and then here we create a function that to read the token to see whether the token is a correct token. Here is our query that we're going to run, which is select name and other things from that table, and then where the token equals. So we are passing the token as a parameter, and we have limited by 1. I think going forward we will need that one because we want only one resource, and then we pass the token to the query, and then we get a resource back. So what it means is that we're going to check this to see whether the person is a valid person to access our database, or is an authorized user to access our API. So the next thing that we do is that we look at model for student info. Student info, so we created something. So if you remember, on our database we have what we call student info, which is student info here, which has some columns, which here student ID, student UID, student ID, student name, student class, program. So that is exactly what we have created in this API for us to be able to use it to create. So we have the public declaration of all those variables, because we want the values to be accessible to other classes. And then there are construct, which is the function that is receiving the connection from the other class. And then the next thing is we create a function to read the data. So we do select this that from our public info, student info, and we are saying that the query here is therefore executed, and then now we have it in here. So now what it means is that you have execute and you have echoed. So now our model is done. Now we need to where we're going to access the API from, which is from the API level. So what it means is that here we're going to create another functions, which is get. So we create a file, new file, get student info, get or student info dot php. You can name it anyhow you want it, depending on how you want it to come out. So you put it there. That one you can click the plus, but we're going to pull a sample of what we've also done, and then we're going to explain through it. Okay, so that is it. So here what to do is that we are actually creating headers that will be sent. So we are saying that our output will be in JSON. We are going to deal with post method and then other headers that are supposed to be added to it. From here, what means that we are doing include ones. What means is that we are saying that we will need this database class that we created in this class, because we need that connection to be able to send to the other class um, for the database access and then executing of our query. And then we are saying the student model class because we want to retrieve the data for student model or run a function from student model. And also we also include the authentication because we want to actually authenticate and see whether he is a we have a rightful user of the web service. So here what means that we create an instance of the database from the declaration that we have done here. We create an instance of database and we do a connect, which is a function on it. So we are calling this function in the um, user the student info. So we created instance of it and we make a connection to it. Now we have a connected the database connection here, which we're going to use. So and then we have created a post method and then assign the student info to it, and we pass the database connection that we got from here to it. So in the student database, in the student model, means that the connection is now available for us to be able to execute the query here. So after that, what it means is that we also pass that connection also to the authentication table, so that because we're going to make connection in both classes to be able to know the student information and also to know the rightful user. Now this query here, we saying data equals JSON decode. So this line is helping us to be able to receive data from the from the API or any application that is calling. It's passed some data, and this is how we receive that data. And then we are saying that the data that we have received has a token in it. So that data that we have received, data.api token, is a variable that is going to be sent to our application, and then we are passing that to our authentication class to token, and then we are going to execute the function which reads the token, which is this function, which is selecting the information from the API authentication table, and then it needs token to be able to execute. So we do and we pass it and we execute here. So here, when there is a valid name that comes from the database, it means that we have a valid user for our API, and now we can execute our query. So here, instead, we're going to execute this student, read this student query from here. So what you do is that we execute the results. We are saying that results, we are declaring the results, and we're saying that it should go to the student table, which is a declaration that we have done here as a student class, and we are saying that it should read this function there, and that is this function in here, getting all the students for us. So what it means is that after this, what we need to do is we will count the number of rows, if you can use it for any other things. We are saying that if the number of rows that has been returned is greater than 0, then it should loop through it and create a JSON array for us. So what it means is that we declare a JSON array here, and then we want to loop through the query that was sent to us, and we are saying that we are extracting each of the rows, and we are creating a JSON objects, and then we will push the JSON object into an array, and then the array will, when we finish that, what we do that we will create JSON encode. We will encode that particular array that has been created to a JSON. So those of you who are not too sure about what JSON are, you can go to the net and see what JSON data is all about. So it's JavaScript's object notation. So sample of it will be let me see how I can see sample of how JSON looks like. This is how a sample of JSON look like. So we want this an actually JSON object. We can get a JSON array and all of that. So you need to dig into that one as well. So now what we are saying is that it should create us the data in that format, because all our application we're going to use JSON out. So what we said that if there's an error, say that no error loading data, or data not found. Okay, so what it means is that when we finish this, it means that our API is actually set to run, because now what we're saying is that go through this, authenticate the token that has been given to you, and then run. And so what we're going to do now, this time we need our advanced REST client. If you also have Postman, you can use Postman to do it. So for me, I will just go and open my advanced REST client, and then I will start pushing it. So it is the URL now. We are doing a post method as we specified earlier, and then we are doing our ports. So it's a local host. My PHP connection is a local host. So if yours is different, you can change it, but it's normally local host, and then mine is on port 80. So if yours the port differs, you can put it there. So we are in it. There's a folder called API. That's in our XAMPP HTTPS folder. We put school API, and in the folder API. So this is it. We are saying that in our school API, there's a folder called API. That's what we are doing there. And then there's a folder also called student info in it. So this is it. There's a folder also called student info. Oh, apparently we didn't do that. We need to create a folder and put that in, because if you are doing a very large project, you will have difficulties managing the files. So let's create student info, and then put that file into it under API. Say move, it moves. Now I have our file in there. We'll continue the test, and then I will saying that get all student info. That's what the file name, get all student info. If you don't want problems, just right click on it, go to rename, and copy the file name. So now you go back to it, and then you put exactly what you copied in there, and then you go. So now our API token in our database, let's check it. API token, let's go here. We'll see API token now is 111. So in testing, we'll use 111. So if yours is different, you can check. So now let's test our API and see. Oh, it's an error, so it didn't give us a JSON. Let's see what the results is giving us. If there's an error, it says error. There's an error. Count on null. So it means that the results that we are getting actually is now from the students info. So how do we do? We need to go and rectify that error on it. Info, the student info, that line 2 to line 29. So it's very important you do this. Anytime you get an error, read through the error, and then you go to use it to correct our data. So what means that there's an error on line 29 of this file. So line 29, where is it? So that is where it's doing a count. So it means that this actually is producing an error. So we need to first go and check that this. So it says this, it says select this, that from this. So in order for us to test, what we need to do first is that let's go run this query on post pgadmin, and then we come back with the result. So let's do a query tool on it, and then let's execute. Apparently it's giving us the data. Why is it not? So I think there's one thing, we didn't return this thing. So it means that the function is not return anything. So we need to return this results that we are getting from the query to the function. So we save it. Let's go and test again and see. So now the data has been returned to us. Now means that the service has been rendered and everything. So our web service is currently working. So this is it. In our future videos, we will continue to add other functionality to stories. Thank you.